Now turning towards Teresa, I'd love to hear what you're seeing from a broker's perspective on how significant settlements are affecting D&O insurance brokers. Are you, for example, seeing shrinking capacity or limits of coverage in general for potential policyholders?
And I love that you used the word settlements, because as Ashley was saying, and I alluded to before, when we think about D&O, we don't think about nuclear verdicts. And just to put a little bit more context on that, when we look at the securities class action lawsuits, and I'll just call them SCAs for short, so that's going to be my little shorthand there. Out of more than about 6,800 securities class actions filed since 1995, less than 1% have been to trial. And in the past decade alone, only 3 of those cases resulted in either a default judgment or a verdict. So we aren't thinking about verdicts here. What instead, as you mentioned, Ezra, is the settlements. And that's what's really problematic in the D&O world here, because as Ashley was saying, the potential damages exposure from what we typically see the securities class actions, just as a quick refresher reminder to this audience, if they're not familiar, securities class actions lawsuits are filed by investors claiming that they have suffered a financial loss due to some fraudulent or misleading statements. So think a stock drop or significant stock volatility. So they're filing those lawsuits. We'll get to a different type of lawsuit in a minute, but just wanted to make sure I took a step back to share that quick refresher on what we're talking about here. And that potential damages exposure from that stock drop is exactly what could potentially lead to a nuclear verdict if they went to trial. But sadly, more often than not, they're either settling, about 46% settlement as a whole, or a 43% dismissal rate. And obviously each industry, if we drill down, has different kind of statistics within that. But that's generally the landscape for D&O. So it's really the settlements that are impacting the entire D&O insurance market. And that is regardless of whether or not a company has a claim or not. It affects everyone, because a lot of the insurance carriers are paying out on those various claims that are out there, or paying defense costs if they do settle above that retention that the company would pay. Since, as we all know or should know, these complex securities cases are very expensive to defend and can move very slowly through the court system. So even if we're at a certain juncture within the case, and again, not even getting to trial or even discovery, things are just taking longer to go through. And so really it's the settlements that are the key issue here. And just again, to give you all some perspective on what kind of dollars we're talking about, if we're talking about just securities class actions, last year in 2024, it was over $4 billion in securities class action settlement dollars. I think the first half of this year, it's over $1 billion, and so it's a little bit less year over year. But again, the backlog of cases are on the insurance carriers' minds. The payouts that they've made and how they're going to be profitable going forward are kind of all pieces to this puzzle. So that's kind of the landscape that we're seeing right now in the backdrop. And then how does that translate into pricing, retentions, and any coverages? Well, we are coming from a softer D&O market over the past few years, where we saw very competitive pricing and retentions. And that was largely for 2 reasons. We had a lack of new demand, i.e. less IPOs, SPACs, and de-SPACs. And also we had several new insurers or MGAs entering the market. So we had more insurance capacity. So after a few years of height of the insurance premiums and retention, we've gone down. And what we're seeing, or started to see in the last half of 2024 into the remainder of this year, is what I'll call stabilization. So we had a few years of these rate reductions for both pricing premiums and retentions. Now we're kind of leveling off a limit for a little bit. So that's a little bit about the current dynamics of how the D&O settlements are impacting what we're seeing in the market and the other interplays of what we're seeing in the macroeconomic environment.
Unlock your potential with lessons from the best in the business. This exclusive event is hosted by Elizabeth Blossfield, Chad Hemingway, Andrea Wells, Alan Lehman, and Ezra Amaker. Visit riskyfuture.com to view the on-demand videos.